Banned my daughter's much older boyfriend from our home, now she's furious and staying in a hotel instead. My name is Sarah, and I'm 48. My husband, Dan, is 46, and we have a 20-year-old daughter, Ellie, who is currently on vacation from college. About 5 months ago, Ellie surprised us by telling us she had a new boyfriend, who I'll call Tom. It caught us off guard since she hadn't mentioned dating anyone before, which is unlike her. Ellie's always been an open book, especially with me, and she usually shares pretty much everything about her life. But this time, she was unusually secretive. She wouldn't show us any pictures, and all we got was a vague explanation that Tom was someone she met at a party through a mutual friend. That's about all we knew. During the past month of her vacation, Ellie's been staying in her college town. The plan had been for her to come back home this particular weekend, and then she threw in something new. She asked if she could bring Tom with her for a few days. She said things were getting serious and she wanted us to meet him. We pointed out that we barely knew anything about this guy, but Ellie just said she wanted it to be a surprise and promised we'd love him. He was clearly important to her, so we agreed and told her we were looking forward to the visit. Yesterday morning, we picked Ellie and Tom up from the airport, and that's when the shock hit. The moment we saw Tom, Dan and I knew, he was a lot older than Ellie, clearly not a college student, and looked like he could have been one of our friends, not her boyfriend. I felt a wave of surprise and disbelief, but I didn't want to make a scene, and I told Dan to hold off too. The drive home was tense enough that even Ellie commented on how frosty it felt. We finally got home, and Dan just asked Tom straight out how old he was. Tom told us he was 44. I felt sick. The man is only 2 years younger than my husband and easily old enough to have been Ellie's father. Dan started grilling Tom. How did they meet? What's their background? Ellie explained again. They met at a party. Tom is well known around her college town, and they just realized they had a lot in common. I honestly couldn't take hearing any more at that point. Dan told Tom to leave. Ellie was furious. She yelled, saying we hadn't even given Tom a chance and that he made her happy. Tom seemed to read the room and left, with Ellie storming out after him. I sent Ellie a message saying we really wanted to talk to her and that she should come home so we could discuss this as a family. She immediately asked if Tom would be welcome. I told her he wouldn't. She called me a judgmental asshole and said she wouldn't be coming. Instead, she and Tom are staying in a local hotel and planning to catch up with friends. Now I feel awful. The last thing I want is to lose my daughter over this. Dan refuses to budge. He's adamant he'd have to be held back if he ever saw Tom again. I'm stuck wondering if I was wrong to say Tom isn't welcome here, or if I truly did the right thing. Update 1. I was completely overwhelmed by everything that unfolded. My head was spinning from the unexpected chaos. Opinions about my choices were so sharply divided, but even so, I was grateful for people being brutally honest. Truthfully, I felt weighed down with guilt and confusion, so instead of responding to every single thought swirling around me, I decided it would be best to share what happened for anyone still interested. If someone hasn't heard the whole story, here's what happened. My 20-year-old daughter, Ellie, showed up at our house with her boyfriend of 5 months, Tom. Tom just so happens to be 44 years old. My husband and I, quite frankly, told Tom he wasn't welcome in our home. As a result, Ellie and Tom have been staying in a hotel nearby. Sunday was a blur of misery for me. All I could think was how desperately I needed to see Ellie. The hiccup, of course, was that seeing her meant also seeing Tom. With that reality in mind, I told my husband I wanted to meet them both for brunch, somewhere neutral and not as emotionally loaded as our home. When I asked my husband to join, he shook his head. He didn't feel stable enough for it yet, so we agreed I'd go alone. My nerves tangled in my stomach the entire drive. But the moment I laid eyes on Ellie, my anxiety melted, at least a little. I was just so relieved to see her in one piece and doing all right. Tom's presence still made me nervous, but this brunch felt like my only chance to dig deeper about who he truly was and what his intentions might be. As we sat down, I tried to draw Tom out, asking polite but probing questions. When I brought up his reputation as being known around a college town and asked how that led to him being at the same party as Ellie, Tom told me he'd gone to that same college when he was her age. He said he loved the place so much he never left, and even now, he still hangs around the college bars and student hangouts, always remaining in the social scene. His answer left me unsettled. I stayed polite, but couldn't shake my discomfort. I learned that Tom has never been married and doesn't have children. He works as a software engineer, passing the time with cooking and meditation. Still, something about all this felt off, though maybe that was just my own bias gnawing at me. Ellie jumped in and began gushing about what a good match they are and how much in common they have. I pressed her to explain and she described how they both adore the same hotspots around town and campus, apparently bonding over a mutual passion for sushi, and she'd never found anyone so mature and understanding. Tom, ever eager, declared Ellie was perfect for him and insisted he was serious about her. I pushed a little further, asking Tom if he'd been with other younger women before. Ellie clearly bristled at this question, but Tom claimed he generally didn't do relationships, and that it was something about Ellie that had finally drawn him in. Brunch dragged on for nearly 2 hours before we finally parted ways. Ellie hugged me, grateful that I'd shown an interest in Tom, and then gently asked if they could come to dinner sometime. I told her maybe, but that I needed to clear it with her dad first. Tom shook my hand and we said our goodbyes. My husband, for his part, is still deeply reluctant, but I feel like I have no choice. If we want to maintain any relationship with Ellie at all, we have to move forward, even if it means opening our doors. First impressions did nothing to warm me to Tom, and this meeting only strengthened my gut feeling that something is off. His answers just cemented my fears that he's not the right one for Ellie. Update 2. After I came home from brunch, I sat my husband down to talk about the possibility of Tom and Ellie joining us for dinner one evening. He was absolutely against the idea from the start, but I told him that if we wanted to maintain any degree of control over the situation, before pushing Ellie away completely, we needed to agree to this. It took a lot of convincing, but eventually he relented, and together we invited Tom and Ellie over for dinner on the upcoming Saturday. Before that dinner, I spoke with my oldest daughter, Ellie's sister, Holly, 23. Until then, Holly hadn't heard a word from Ellie about any of it, and she was stunned when I filled her in. Holly jumped immediately to social media, determined to see what she could uncover, but Tom barely has an online trace, so she didn't get far. Holly announced she was coming to dinner too. At first, I was reluctant, worried it would stir up more trouble, but finally I agreed. Saturday night arrived. At the table, Holly wasted no time. She went after Tom relentlessly, grilling him in a way I'd never dared. She asked if younger girls were his type, interrogated why a man his age still showed up at college parties, and peppered him with barbed comments. Ellie pleaded with Holly again and again to back down. I did my best to smooth things over, trying to keep the peace, while my husband sat there, seething in silence. I could feel how tense he was with Tom in the room. Finally, Tom and Ellie said they had some big news to share. Ellie took a deep breath and told us she and Tom were planning on moving in together for the upcoming college year. I almost spat out my drink. I knew Ellie had originally planned to live with friends, so I immediately questioned her about it. Tom jumped in with his answer. He said, I realized I'm probably not going to have another long-term relationship. Ellie makes me so happy, I don't want to waste any more time. She's who I want as my wife and the future mother of my children. That was the breaking point. My husband lost it. He stood up, his voice booming as he told Tom to get out of the house. Tom stood suddenly and looked completely taken aback. Ellie started to cry. I haven't seen my husband shout like that in years, and I think it shocked her deeply. Holly, without missing a beat, chimed in that Tom had it coming and flat out told Ellie she needed to get away from that pedo freak. It all imploded in mere seconds. Ellie left the house sobbing, Tom right behind her. My husband stormed upstairs without another word, and I found myself crumpled and weeping, inconsolable. Since then, I've reached out to Ellie again and again, but she hasn't responded. I am terrified she's going to move in with Tom. I see him as someone who is trying to upend her entire life when she's only 20. She doesn't need marriage or kids, especially not with a man so much older. The fact that she's never even had a real relationship before makes it so much worse. I know she's deeply infatuated, so infatuated that she won't listen to any of us. To make it even harder, my husband has told me point blank that if Ellie marries Tom, that'll be the end of it. He wouldn't want any relationship with her from that moment forward. My family is teetering on the edge, and all I can do is watch as Ellie slips further away. Update 3. Ellie was always such a bright, cheerful soul, her laughter echoing through the house and her social calendar overflowing with plans. It feels like just yesterday she was surrounded by friends, immersed in her college life, and so full of promise. But now, everything has changed. She lives with Tom in her old college town, even though she was forced to drop out when she became pregnant. Most of her friends have drifted away, wanting nothing to do with Tom, and it breaks my heart to see her so isolated. My husband barely speaks to Ellie anymore. He refuses to have anything to do with Tom, shutting them both out. Holly, my other daughter, feels exactly the same, openly stating she wants no part in Ellie or her baby's life as long as Tom is around. She calls him the predator and I can't blame her for the way she feels, but it adds another layer to the heartbreak I carry every day. I'm the only one who tries to keep a tether between Ellie and our family. I reach out as much as I can, not just because she's my daughter and I love her, but because deep down, I know that if things fall apart, I might be the only person she has left to turn to. Watching her gradually isolate herself, cut off from the world she used to adore, is harder than I thought possible. For a brief moment, back in March, I saw a glimmer of hope, like the Ellie I remember trying to surface. She called me, sobbing, her voice trembling as she told me that Tom had cheated on her. I wasn't surprised. The betrayal came with another college student, even younger than Ellie. I tried so hard to reason with her, gently urging her to leave, hoping this would finally open her eyes. But Tom reeled her back in with a storm of love bombing, and then the news of her pregnancy sealed her decision to stay with him. Now, the wedding is set for next summer, a date specifically chosen so the baby can be the central focus for now. My husband and Holly have made it clear, they won't be attending. Many others in my family have told me privately that they feel uncomfortable with the situation, too. All I can do is hope that Ellie finds her way, and that when she needs someone, she knows I'll be here, waiting for her. Update 4. I never thought I'd be writing another update, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It's been 8 months since my last post, and so much has happened that I hardly know where to begin. The baby arrived in late September, a beautiful little girl they named Sophia. Despite everything, Holding my granddaughter for the first time broke something open inside me. She's perfect, with Ellie's bright eyes and that same stubborn curl to her hair that all the women in our family have. For a brief moment, watching Ellie cradle her daughter, I saw glimpses of the girl I raised, gentle, nurturing, completely devoted. The wedding was postponed indefinitely. Tom claimed it was because they wanted to focus on being new parents, but I suspected there was more to it. Ellie looked exhausted those first few months, and whenever I visited, Tom seemed to hover, always inserting himself into our conversations or finding reasons why Ellie couldn't talk long. Then, 3 weeks ago, everything changed. Ellie called me at 2 a.m., hysterical. Through her sobbing, I could barely make out what she was saying, but I caught enough. Tom was gone. Not just out for the night, but gone. His clothes, his computer, even his meditation cushions that he was so precious about. All of it, vanished. I threw on clothes and drove the hour to her apartment, finding Ellie on the floor of the nursery, clutching Sophia and shaking. The apartment felt hollow, like a shell. She kept repeating, "He said he'd be right back. He just went to get diapers." It took hours to piece together what had happened. Tom had been acting strange for weeks, secretive phone calls, unexplained absences, claiming work was crazy busy when Ellie knew his projects had been light. The night before he left, she'd overheard him on a hushed call in the bathroom, something about having to make a choice and the timing isn't right. When she confronted him the next morning, he'd kissed her forehead, said he loved her, and left for the store. That was 5 days before she called me. But here's where it gets worse, and I'm still processing this myself. Yesterday, Holly called me in a panic. She'd been doing some digging online. She never stopped keeping tabs on Tom, even when the rest of us tried to move on. She found him. Not missing, not hiding, active on social media, but under a slightly different name, and he wasn't alone. The photos made my stomach drop. Tom, looking relaxed and happy, his arm around a girl who couldn't be more than 19. The timestamps showed they were posted just days after he disappeared. But that wasn't even the worst part. Holly had done more digging and found older posts, months back, showing him with this same girl at restaurants, concerts, places around Ellie's old college town. Places he claimed he was going to network or clear his head. He'd been cheating on Ellie for months, possibly even before Sophia was born. And now he'd simply walked away from both of them like they never existed. I haven't told Ellie about the photos yet. She's barely functioning as it is, trying to care for Sophia while processing the abandonment. She keeps asking if I think he's coming back, if maybe something happened to him. Part of me wants to show her the truth so she can stop hoping, but another part of me knows it would destroy what little stability she has left. My husband's reaction surprised me. When I told him what had happened, I expected him to say "I told you so" or express some kind of satisfaction that he'd been right about Tom all along. Instead, he just went quiet for a long time, then asked when Ellie and the baby were coming home. "Home?" I asked. "She's our daughter," he said simply. "And that's our granddaughter. They belong here. So that's where we are now." Ellie and Sophia moved back in with us last week. Ellie's room looks almost exactly like it did when she left for college 3 years ago, except now there's a crib in the corner and baby clothes mixed in with her old textbooks. She's enrolled in online classes to finish her degree, and I'm helping with Sophia during the day. Holly came by yesterday, her first time seeing Ellie since that disastrous dinner. I held my breath, not knowing what would happen, but Holly just walked up to her sister, wrapped her in the biggest hug, and said, "I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me." They spent the evening on the couch, Sophia sleeping between them, talking quietly about everything and nothing. It was the first time I'd seen Ellie smile, really smile, in months. I know we have a long road ahead. Ellie is dealing with the trauma of abandonment, the reality of being a single mother at 21, and the slow process of rebuilding her life. There are legal issues to sort out, financial considerations, and the day-to-day challenges of starting over. But for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I feel like we might actually be okay. Ellie is home, Sophia is healthy, and our family is slowly healing. Tom took a lot from us, Ellie's trust, her college experience, years of peace in our home. But he couldn't take everything. He couldn't take the bond between sisters, or a mother's love, or a father's ability to forgive when it really matters. I just pray that wherever Tom is, he stays far away from us. Ellie doesn't need any more heartbreak, and I don't think my husband would be as restrained as he was 3 years ago if Tom ever showed his face again. Update 5. I thought our healing was finally on track. Ellie had been doing so well, taking her online classes seriously, bonding with Sophia, slowly rebuilding her relationship with Holly and Dan. We'd settled into a routine that felt almost normal. Sophia had just turned 6 months old and was starting to sit up on her own, babbling constantly and bringing so much light back into our house. For the first time in years, I actually believed we were past the worst of it. Then last Tuesday happened. I was in the kitchen making lunch when someone knocked on the door. Ellie was upstairs giving Sophia a bath, and Dan was at work, so I went to answer it. Standing on my porch was a woman I'd never seen before, probably in her early 30s, professionally dressed, with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Are you Sarah?" she asked. When I nodded, she introduced herself as Jessica Chen and asked if we could talk privately. Something in her tone made my stomach clench, but I invited her in. What she told me next turned everything upside down again. Jessica works for a law firm in the state where Ellie's old college is located. She'd been hired by 3 different women, all young, all former students, to investigate Tom for what she called a pattern of predatory behavior. One of the women was pregnant. Another had been financially devastated after Tom convinced her to take out student loans to support his business ventures that never materialized. The third had been stalked and harassed when she tried to break up with him. But here's the part that made my blood run cold. Jessica had been trying to find Ellie for months. She needed her to testify about Tom's behavior, particularly the financial manipulation and emotional abuse. The other women's cases were stronger with Ellie's corroboration. "I'm not here to cause trouble for your daughter," Jessica said carefully. "But Tom Myers, if that's even his real name, has hurt a lot of young women. He has a system. He targets college students, particularly those who seem naive or isolated. He love bombs them, gets them dependent on him, then either disappears when they become inconvenient or destroys their lives when they try to leave." I felt sick. Financial manipulation? Jessica pulled out a folder. "Did you know Tom opened several credit cards in Ellie's name? The debt totals nearly $40,000. He also took out a personal loan using her as a cosigner. The bills have been piling up at their old address." The room started spinning. Ellie had no idea. She'd been so focused on just surviving each day with Sophia that she hadn't even thought about checking her credit or forwarding her mail properly. That's when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Ellie appeared in the doorway with Sophia on her hip, her hair still damp from the bath. She took one look at Jessica, then at my face, and I watched her whole body tense. "Who are you?" she asked, and I could hear that familiar defensive edge creeping back into her voice. Jessica introduced herself gently, but as she began explaining why she was there, Ellie's expression changed from wariness to confusion to horror. When Jessica mentioned the debt, Ellie actually staggered backward. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Tom never asked me to sign anything like that." "I would have remembered. He was very good at making it seem routine," Jessica said. "The women we've interviewed describe similar experiences. Joint accounts for household expenses, credit applications disguised as apartment paperwork, loan documents mixed in with other things during stressful moments." I watched my daughter crumble all over again. She sank onto the couch, clutching Sophia, and I could see her mentally reviewing every document Tom had ever put in front of her. The apartment lease. The hospital paperwork when Sophia was born. Even simple things like signing for deliveries. "Oh God," she breathed. The night Sophia was born, Tom brought so many forms to the hospital room. He said they were all medical consent forms and insurance paperwork. I was so exhausted and in pain, I just signed everything he put in front of me. Jessica nodded sympathetically. "That appears to be when the personal loan was processed. He likely counted on the chaos of new parenthood to cover his tracks. But it got worse." Jessica showed us printed screenshots of Tom's social media activity, not just with the teenager Holly had found, but with multiple young women over the past several years. There were patterns: the same restaurants he'd taken Ellie to, the same spontaneous getaway spots, even some of the same lines about mature love and being ready to settle down. "We believe he's been running this same con for at least 5 years, Jessica explained. "Your daughter wasn't his first victim, and unfortunately, she probably won't be his last unless we can build a case strong enough to stop him." Ellie was quiet for a long time, just rocking Sophia and staring at nothing. Finally, she looked up at Jessica and said, "What do you need me to do?" That was a week ago. Since then, our house has been chaos. Jessica connected us with a financial advisor who's helping us understand the scope of Ellie's debt problem. It's worse than we initially thought. We're also working with a lawyer to explore Ellie's options, including the possibility of filing charges for identity theft and financial fraud. The hardest part is watching Ellie process all of this. Some days she's angry, fired up about getting justice and stopping Tom from hurting other women. Other days she can barely get out of bed, overwhelmed by the realization of how completely she was manipulated. Yesterday, she found an old journal she'd kept during her relationship with Tom. Reading through it, she kept pointing out entries where she'd written about feeling confused or questioning her own memory of conversations. "I thought I was going crazy," she told me. "I kept writing about how I felt like I was forgetting important things or misunderstanding situations. But it wasn't me, he was gaslighting me the whole time." Dan's reaction surprised me again. I expected him to be furious about the debt, stressed about the potential financial impact on our family. Instead, he's been laser-focused on supporting Ellie through the legal process and making sure Sophia's needs are met. Last night, he told me he'd rather mortgage the house than let Tom's actions destroy our daughter's future. The preliminary hearing is scheduled for next month. Jessica is confident they have a strong case, especially with Ellie's testimony and the documentation of the financial fraud. But I'm terrified about what this will put Ellie through, reliving everything that happened with Tom in a courtroom. There's one more thing that's been keeping me awake at night. Yesterday, Jessica mentioned that the other women reported Tom had threatened them when they tried to expose him. Nothing physical, but psychological intimidation. Showing up at their workplaces, contacting their families, that kind of thing. Has he tried to contact Ellie at all since he left? She asked. The truthful answer is no. But now I'm wondering if his complete disappearance was just another manipulation tactic, making Ellie feel abandoned and worthless so she'd be less likely to come forward if his other activities ever surfaced. As I write this, Ellie is upstairs putting Sophia down for the night, singing the same lullaby I used to sing to her and Holly. Despite everything we've been through, despite the long legal battle ahead of us, there's something healing about having that sound fill our house again. I just hope we're strong enough to see this through to the end. Update 6. I never imagined I'd be writing another update so soon, but the past 3 weeks have been a whirlwind that I'm still trying to process. Just when I thought we had a handle on the legal situation with Tom, everything took a turn I never saw coming. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for last Thursday. Ellie had been preparing for weeks, working with Jessica and going over her testimony until she could recite the timeline of Tom's manipulation in her sleep. I was proud of how strong she'd become. There was a determination in her eyes that reminded me of the confident girl she used to be. But 2 days before the hearing, Jessica called with news that stopped us cold. Tom had been arrested. Not for what he did to Ellie or the other women, though. He'd been picked up in Arizona on completely unrelated charges: identity theft and fraud involving an elderly couple he'd been caring for. Apparently, he'd convinced them he was their grandson and had been draining their accounts for months. The whole thing was so brazen that it made national news, and that's how Jessica's team found out about it. This actually strengthens our case significantly, Jessica explained during an emergency meeting at our kitchen table. It establishes a clear pattern of predatory behavior across multiple demographics. Ellie just stared at the news article Jessica had printed out. There was Tom's mugshot, the same face that had charmed her at that college party, now looking hollow and desperate under harsh police lighting. He told me he was visiting his sick grandmother in Arizona, she said quietly. Last fall, when I was about 6 months pregnant. He was gone for 2 weeks. I remember being so touched that he was taking care of family. The cruel irony wasn't lost on any of us. But here's where things get complicated, and honestly, a little scary. Yesterday morning, I was getting Sophia ready for her morning walk when Holly burst through the front door, her face flushed and her hands shaking. "Mom, we have a problem," she said, pulling out her phone. "Tom's not the only one we need to worry about." She showed me a message she'd received on Instagram from someone named Marcus_T_94. The message was short but chilling. "Tell your sister her boyfriend's arrest made things very difficult for a lot of people. She needs to drop the case and keep her mouth shut if she knows what's good for her and the baby." My blood ran cold. Who is Marcus_T_94? "That's what's terrifying," Holly said. I did some digging. The account is mostly empty, but I found one photo from 2 years ago. "Mom, it's Tom, but he looks completely different, shorter hair, clean-shaven, wearing a suit. And he's standing next to 2 other men at some kind of business conference." The implications hit me immediately. Tom wasn't just some lone predator targeting college girls. He was part of something bigger. I called Jessica right away, and she was at our house within an hour. When I showed her the message and the photo Holly had found, her expression grew grim. "This changes everything," she said. "We need to contact the FBI. What your family has stumbled into isn't just individual fraud cases. This looks like organized crime." That afternoon, 2 federal agents came to our house. Agents Rivera and Thompson were professional but serious, and they asked questions that made my head spin. Had Tom ever mentioned business partners? Had he received packages or mail at Ellie's apartment? Did he ever leave town for work that seemed vague or secretive? Ellie answered as best she could, but I could see the weight of realization settling over her. This wasn't just about a manipulative ex-boyfriend anymore. She and Sophia might actually be in danger. "We're going to need you and the baby to stay somewhere else for a while," Agent Rivera told us. "Just as a precaution while we investigate the extent of this network." Dan immediately suggested we all go stay with his brother in Michigan, but the agents shook their heads. "Actually, we'd prefer if you stayed local but changed locations frequently. Hotel rooms, different family members' houses. We need Ms. Ellie available for questioning, but we also need to keep you safe." So here we are, writing this from a hotel room 40 minutes from home. Ellie is asleep in one bed with Sophia curled up beside her, and I'm sitting by the window, watching the parking lot and jumping at every car that passes by. The strangest part is how this has actually brought our family closer together. Holly has barely left Ellie's side since the threat came through. Dan, who I thought might buckle under this kind of pressure, has become our rock, coordinating with the agents, handling the hotel arrangements, even learning how to make Sophia's bottles correctly so Ellie can rest. This morning, while Ellie was showering, Holly and I were sitting with Sophia when she looked up at me with those bright eyes so much like her mother's. "You know what's crazy, Mom?" Holly said. 6 months ago, I wanted nothing to do with this baby because of who her father was. Now I do anything to protect her. I understood exactly what she meant. Sophia isn't Tom's legacy, she's purely Ellie's. And ours. Agent Thompson called an hour ago with an update. Tom's arrest in Arizona has opened doors they never expected. Apparently, he's been cooperating with authorities, trying to work out some kind of plea deal. The business conference photo Holly found has led them to at least 6 other men running similar schemes across the country. "Your daughter's case might be the key to bringing down the entire operation," he told me. "But cooperation comes with risks. If Tom is talking to the FBI about his partners, those partners might see Ellie as a threat that needs to be eliminated. I never imagined that my biggest worry would shift from Tom breaking my daughter's heart to Tom's associates potentially wanting to silence her permanently. Tomorrow, we're moving to a different hotel. Next week, if everything goes according to plan, Ellie will give her testimony to a federal grand jury instead of a local court. I look at my granddaughter sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that her first year of life has been spent in the shadow of such darkness. But she's also surrounded by more love than I think any baby has ever had. 3 adults who would move mountains to keep her safe, and a mother who's finding her strength again after having it systematically torn down. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together.